Thank you, Jeff. And the moment you've all been waiting for. So again, Nan and I are very happy to be here and have an opportunity to talk and interact with CPAC on what's a very important part of the next 5 years facing Marblehead Public Schools. We purposely did not make this a strategic planning effort because I think that people have images of what a strategic plan is, and too often in districts or organizations or businesses, a strategic plan becomes a shelf document. And that's not at all what we wanted for the district. We wanted it to be a collaborative effort that identified areas that in the next 5 years would make Marblehead Public Schools a stronger, better, and more inclusive public school system. So Planning for Success is part of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It is designed to be flexible and customizable, which was a very important feature for me as we were talking about putting together a plan for the district, that it would not be a cookie cutter approach. Nan and I had a lot of conversation about what the structure and the composition of the plan would be. And one of the first very purposeful decisions that we made was not to facilitate it ourselves, that we would select a facilitator from outside the district so that this wouldn't be John Bucky's strategic plan or Nan Murphy's Planning for Success initiative. So our current context is unique. I think it's fair to say here in Marblehead, coming through several years of different leaders and different issues and dilemmas that the district was facing. So we wanted to have a process that took into consideration that history with an eye to the future while realizing the current context. And the current context is important because that is a global pandemic. So you have a lot of things at play as you're approaching putting together this Planning for Success initiative. So it's important for us to connect it to the leadership team. So the initial planning that was done in preparation for bringing the facilitator in was doing a SWOT analysis. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the SWOT analysis, where you look at your organization, your current context, and identify areas of strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And so we did that, and that helped to really lay a foundation for the work done by the Planning for Success team. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that group was organized. In Marblehead, it was clear as we put together reopening committees and health and safety and wellness committees and superintendent advisory committees that the community very much wants to be included. And so when you look up the Planning for Success, it talks about engaging the community. And I'm very happy to say that as we reflect on the document that we produced, we were able to do all of this, that each of our stakeholder groups were included in the work, whether they were part of the leadership planning team, the larger planning team, or were engaged by the larger planning team through a variety of community forums. So each member of that larger planning team went out and engaged people, whether it was a neighborhood group, a civic group. I brought in all of the town leaders for a cabinet exercise that really helped inform the plan that we'll go over this evening. So when we were identifying the planning team members, it was important to me what I've highlighted here, the voices of those less often heard from in the district are included. And I think that there's a perception that one group maybe speaks more than another group, or one group has the superintendent's ear, or one group is the voice of the community. And we wanted to make sure that everybody felt that they were part of this process and that nobody was seen as, quote, handpicked as a favorite of the superintendent. We went so far as when we were developing the larger planning team of drawing names out of a hat live at a school committee meeting, so that anyone that had put forward their interest in participating in the planning team process knew that it was not handpicked by Nan, handpicked by me, but was a very clear, transparent, fair process. So at the end of that process, these are the larger planning team members. And I just want to read them off. It was Nan and me, our former director of student services, our current director of student services, our METGO director, the building principals. Scott Solberg served as your CPAC rep. Monique Lloyd represented our METGO students and families. Jason Silva was representing the town. Then we have two elementary parents, Mimi LeMay and Reese Dahlberg, middle school parent, Jeff St. George, high school parent, two elementary teachers, a middle school teacher, a high school teachers. Merle and Cindy Tower Lowenson represented the community. Two school committee members, Sarah Fox and Megan Taylor. And then, not that I had any favorites on the planning team, but our student reps were really exceptional, and they engaged throughout the process and were really involved in contributing members to our Planning for Success. Then the leadership team had the 15 members, superintendent, assistant superintendent, our director of student services, METGO, assistant superintendent for finance and operation, facilities, technology, English language learners, the principals, and two assistant principal representatives. Just trying to make sure I am omitting people as I go. So here is this aggressive timeline that we undertook. And we started in April with the planning process. We got started in May with the planning teams. Each of the planning sessions were facilitated by Ruth Gilbert. She works for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, in addition to working to the Mass Association of School Superintendents, in addition to being a retired superintendent, in addition to being a retired director of teaching and learning and an assistant superintendent. So she brought a wealth of knowledge, having facilitated this process in numerous other districts, in addition to doing this work as a superintendent herself. So at the end of all of that work, this is what you will see published. It has our mission, our vision, our core values, and then that theory of action, which is an if-then statement, and it takes into account all of those things that are outlined in the focus areas, that if we're able to do these, then we will be able to reach our highest potential in partnership with our community. As Merle mentioned, we have the focus areas, the 5 focus areas. Those are teaching and learning, professional culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, technology, and facilities and operations. And so you might ask, well, why those 5? How did we get to those 5? It was a result of that 26-member planning team going out into the community and asking people, how will Marblehead Public Schools, it was called a Back to the Future exercise, in 2026, how will the Marblehead schools be better? What do they need to undertake to become a better, stronger, more inclusive system? And when you brought all 26 people back and they shared all those representative stakeholder focus groups that they did, these were the 5 areas that continued to emerge. Certainly there were outliers of things, but overall, these 5 areas kept coming up again and again for each group. So from there, we developed strategic objectives to as the guiding force for the work in teaching and learning. That is to fully align teaching and learning pre-K to 12 with our MTSS framework to ensure all students meet or exceed academic and social emotional learning expectations. For professional, in Nan Murphy, one of the things that we are doing is assigning a leader for each of these focus areas. So Nan is the facilitator, the leader for the teaching and learning group, and she'll talk with you a little bit more about her work in that arena. Professional culture is one that I will undertake and lead. That is actually the only area that is a carryover from a prior strategic plan in the district. And so it is important to me that we attend to those professional culture areas, those objectives and initiatives over the next 5 years. And under professional culture, we want to build, strengthen, and support educator capacity and well-being. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that that was clearly something that emerged as a very important focus area. It's work that's being done across the country in school districts and attending to promoting equity, ensure inclusion by acknowledging and embedding all forms of diversity throughout the district. And our METCO director, Deandra Williams, will be the point person for that work. Technology, certainly as a result of the pandemic, we discovered that we have a lot of catching up to do in technology. So Stephen Kwiatek will lead that group, as he has already done some exceptional work in technology. And our objective there is to provide students and staff with the necessary technology and support to promote successful student outcomes. And then finally, facilities and operations will be led by our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, Michelle Cresta. And the objective there is to establish a comprehensive and equitable staffing, compensation, maintenance, capital plan, and align it to our facilities audit. All of these things have budget implications and budget drivers. I know that that has often been a question when we were talking about planning for success. And it's not planning for the budget that we came up with these, but clearly each of these focus areas with the objectives and then these initiatives will have budget implications. And so the strategic initiatives under each of those objectives, there are 6 for teaching and learning, and I'm not going to take time to read all of those to you because I know Nan's going to go into much more detail. There are 5 under professional culture, 8 for DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion, 5 for technology, and 8 for facilities. You will see that some of those are bolded, and the ones that are in bold are initiatives that we intend to focus on for this year. I do want to clarify that even though something is bolded, that doesn't mean that it is a checkbox item, and at the end of the year, we'll say we accomplished that. These are initiatives that we will begin the work on. Some of them will be completed in a year, while others might take additional time. And then these are the outcomes that as a result of all of this work in teaching and learning, professional culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, technology, and facilities and operations, this is what we hope to achieve over the course of the next 5 years. I'm going to dish over to Nan to jump into a little deeper on the teaching and learning piece. And when she finishes, then we'll open it up for specific questions.
Great. I so appreciate this opportunity because in just hearing, John, what you have just walked us all through, it's a great reminder of how much we've been able to accomplish this year. And when we gathered together at that initial meeting, it was so daunting to think about developing this work and to see where we are and how much we've been able to accomplish as a collaborative group has just been fantastic. So I'm going to take you deeper into that yellow column, which had a strategic objective and a strategic initiative highlighted that focuses the work for this year, plan for the first year of implementation in our plan for success in the teaching and learning column. So in September, we met with the consultant and finalized an understanding of how I needed to run and facilitate the work ahead. In October, I started by reaching out to building leaders. I asked every building leader to be part of our working team. I asked Paula Donnelly to be part of the working team, and each of them to select a teacher. so that we had both leadership voices and teacher voices at the table planning this work. We also have district members of the instructional leadership team embedded in the work as well. So on October 20th, we had our first meeting where we kind of just calibrated and started looking at the materials John just showed you, and thinking about our initiative and how do we move that initiative forward. We had 2 planning meetings in November, which were really good and productive, and I'm going to share with you the results of that meeting. And then in January, December and January, we have some school-based work. We have worked together up to this point as a cohesive group, and now building leaders are taking tasks to the school level to work with teams within their school around our shared understanding of what we need to do this year. So if we could go to the next slide. So here we have the 2 yellow columns that John highlighted. So our overarching strategic objective for our teaching and learning in our plan for success is to fully align teaching and learning, pre-K through 12, with our multi-tiered systems of support, otherwise known as MTSS framework, to ensure all students meet or exceed academic and social emotional learning expectations. So for families and professionals in the special education world, MTSS has a lot of the same structures as our response to intervention framework. So what we are looking to do through this strategic initiative is to provide just right supports for our students so that they're able to access the curriculum and instruction, practice it at their instructional level, and then exceed grade level, meet or exceed grade level standards, both social, emotionally, and academic. We know that all students don't have all the same capabilities, so that's where the tiered instruction comes in. And we also know that not all students have just academic needs. Some of our students have a variety of different needs. And so we want to make sure that those supports are in place for our learners so that they can be their best selves when they're accessing the curriculum. So for this year, we have boiled down, if you look at, we have 5 kind of strategic objectives or strategic initiatives that we have brainstormed as a team. And what, to John's point about 2026, where do we want to end up? And where we want to end up, kind of going back and planning, what do we need to do first to get to that point down the road 5 years from now? So we really landed on, in Marblehead, one of the things we need to do first is we need to align our curriculum. And by that, we need to develop a map of sorts to demonstrate for teachers and for district members where instruction is happening and at what time and how is it being assessed. And that typically drives a district in terms of curriculum. Marblehead does not have that. So when I came to Marblehead as an assistant superintendent, the first thing I asked for was the scope and sequence and the curriculum map, because it's an important gauge in understanding, one, what materials are used across the district and at what grade levels, and when does instruction happen, so I can help by planning professional development. So if there's a narrative writing unit happening in 6th grade, I know where that PD and those conversations with teachers need to happen and what time of year. So neither of those resources at the district level were built to be to help drive the work in the district. So as we talk about all the things we want to do to get to alignment, the very first thing the team agreed on is we need to develop a map. And in order to develop a map, which is an outline of what materials are used and where, we have to look at the Massachusetts frameworks and we have to develop a scope and sequence for instruction. So teachers need to know what and when is covered throughout their grade level. And that's the scope and sequence. So through developing that curriculum map and the scope and sequence, we're going to be able to say, okay, here's in the scope and sequence what we need to teach when. Then we'll look and develop the curriculum map and say, okay, we have this piece of curriculum that aligns to that. but we don't have it in 4th grade, and we don't have it in 8th grade, and we have nothing in 9th grade. So that's how when John talks about how the budget issues are related and embedded in all of that, that's how those layers become more apparent. But we have to kind of calibrate a baseline first before we can get deep into that assessment piece. So the group, as I mentioned, we have all of our building principals. We have Dr. Donnelly, we have Rebecca Brand, who's an instructional specialist, Meredith Wishart, we have Joan Miller, Leela Dixon, Michelle Carlson, and we also have David Rainey from the high school, and Mary LeBlanc from the elementary, who joined after I put this slide together. They committed to the long term. So as you can see, we've connected the objective to the initiative. And then if we could go to the next slide. This is what the first step is. So in our planning sheet, once we decide what our initiative is for the first year, then you have to break down the terminology so that I could give this planning document to somebody who's not familiar with education, and it would have the information in it to help them understand what's going on. So the key vocabulary that's driving the work, the definition of what the work is, important links to help deepen the understanding for parents or teachers that are maybe new to the language. And Dr. Bucky, if you could go to the next slide. And then the next plan was, all right, so describe your implementation. So you've got this lofty goal of developing a scope and sequence that will result in a curriculum map, which will ultimately result in curriculum supports and purchases. So how are you going to get there this year? So in November, we shared the recently developed draft. So when I got here, like I said, there wasn't anything. So I kind of started digging around, talking to people, and teachers were like, oh yeah, this is what I've developed. This is what I use. This is what my team uses. So we started gathering all of that information. And over the summer, I worked with Rebecca Brand, and we developed a draft of kind of a scope and sequence of what we kind of understood things to be in Marblehead. And so we wanted to share that out so that all of the staff had that. And then in November, building principals will provide the structure and/or forum for communicating and collecting feedback. So they shared the draft of the feedback of the scope and sequence draft. And then the plan is to have them develop a source of feedback for how teachers believe the work in deepening the development of the scope and sequence should move forward. So part of the implementation is accountability. So to John's point, we don't want this to just be a document that we draft and put on the shelf. So we have tasked certain people with certain responsibilities. And so progress monitoring is going to be happening throughout. So there'll be meetings that happen periodically with the core group where we come back together and check in on the work that's happened that we were responsible for during the month of the year. So you can see in December, one of the tasks that needs to happen is we need to allocate time for the work. So at the high school, Dan Bauer is going to allocate time for departments to revise and edit the scope and sequence using the district format. So I provided a format. Lead teachers are going to look at it and start making some revisions and edits to what has the draft that's been put forward. That same thing is going to happen at the elementary with the principals using the lead teacher time, working with that team, doing the same work, and the village and the vets as well. The vets is at an advantage where they have built-in department time. So not only lead teachers, but department teams will be working on that work together. So we're ready for the next slide. So in January and February, the time will be allocated at the district level for principals to strategically share information gathered and plan for vertical teaming and next steps. So Dr. Bucky and I will be using our leadership time where we have principals together reporting out, this is what my lead teachers are saying, this is what I'm finding is that we're struggling with. And we'll be able to kind of help each other in that work and deepen and get to really where we are with the scope and sequence. The other thing that'll be happening January and February is the continuation of teacher review and further alignment of grade level scope and sequence. So that work continues. It's going to start next month and it's going to go all the way through February. The principal's still accountable for providing that teacher time for vertical review. So what that step is in the early winter is providing time for the Glover team of lead teachers who've developed the scope and sequence to meet with the Village team, and the same with the Brown. So they're aligning and saying, oh, I thought I taught that in 4th grade. I didn't realize teachers in 3rd grade were covering so much of that topic. So let's see, do we want that to be the case, continue forward, or do we want to remove that as a 3rd grade expectation and make that a 4th grade expectation? So those vertical conversations will happen January and February. And then in March, we'll begin to consolidate all March through May. We will take all the information that's been collected by the lead teachers and teams and begin to develop a Marblehead scope and sequence. And the accountability will be on all of us kind of doing the work. And then May through June, I will run a working group over the summer and hopefully be able to gather a collective group and where we will look at our scope and sequence, begin to connect it to the curriculum map, and begin to really think about where in year 2, maybe go back and revisit one of those initiatives that was on that yellow column, or maybe by that time our work will have revealed another initiative that's more important that will drive year 2. And then one more slide, John. The monitoring I talked to is ongoing, so this will never end. We're all accountable to, we call it plan, implement, assess. So it's never just, we're going to step away from this work. We're going to kind of always be in that process and be talking about, where is all of that work? Have we got to the point where we're not meeting at one particular grade level, or there's a working group that hasn't made as much progress? How can we all kind of step in, help them move it forward so we don't end up in a place where we're hoping to be at the end of the year? So I think we're ready for, and here we go, like, what do we need to do well? So as I begin to plan and think about my budget requests, I'm beginning to think about, where does stipending teachers for this work over the summer fit? What additional resources might we need to be able to move a solid scope and sequence and curriculum mapping and curriculum adoptions forward? So this is another document this is a work in progress. This is not something that reflects the work that this will be added to. So there is a consistent budgetary lens as well that's connected to the process. It was a lot, so.
So I'll just make a few concluding remarks about the accountability piece. We are asking each of the facilitators to report out regularly to school committee, so people and the community are kept abreast of the work that is being done. So in October, Stephen Kwiatek presented to school committee on what has been done in technology and sort of where his group is headed this year, and he'll come back and present. Nan presented at another October meeting what's happening with the teaching and learning. We'll have Deandra present specifically to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll update on professional culture, and Assistant Superintendent Cresta will talk about facilities and operations, so that people get a sense of the work that is happening, and in particular, what the budget implications will be, because as we've said repeatedly, these will each have an impact on the budget. one of the things that Nan presented on for the teaching and learning piece is not a specific initiative, but the update on the schedule group that she has been leading. And, Nan made the point that we've come into the district where some of these pieces that might have been taken for granted were not here. There's an opportunity there for us to build. And that was similar to the elementary schedule. There was an assertion made that we had changed or dismantled the elementary schedule when in fact one did not exist. And so we developed a schedule, and that's part of, I think, where we'll be successful, pun intended, with planning for success, is Marblehead has traditionally been a system of neighborhood schools that have had very intimate identities and done good work. And we're different in some ways and similar in other ways. And the work that this will do is taking us from a system of schools to a school system. And that work is sometimes difficult and messy and challenging because aligning what happens at one first grade classroom across a school district means that decisions on curricular units and units of study and materials and resources. And so we're in a good place with this, but we have a lot of work ahead of us to do: elementary scheduling, curriculum building, budgeting, facilities. And so it's a solid plan, and we're very appreciative of all the stakeholders that had an opportunity in helping us get to this point.
So does anybody?
I'm just going to add to that too, in terms of equity and in ensuring across schools and across grade levels that every student has an equitable opportunity to engage and interact with curriculum, and that it shouldn't depend on your teacher's interests or when certain topics or if certain topics you get exposed to, and what writing program you are offered. We want the best, most accurate research-based curriculum, and we want all students to have access to it, and we want all students to have access to it at their instructional level and at their grade level. So that we need to train teachers to get really good at scaffolding and providing interventions, so that if you're in third grade and you're not quite ready to engage with third grade material, you're still engaging with third grade standards, and you're getting the equal opportunity to engage with knowledge of third graders as all your colleagues, your peers.
So does anybody have any questions for Nan in terms of what she's presented so far? Anyone? You can raise your hand. You can just speak up. Jen, did you have a question?
No, I was going to say you can write it in the chat, and if you want to ask a question anonymously, feel free to direct message it to me, and I'm happy to ask the question on your behalf.
That'd be great. Nan, could I ask a question while we're waiting for people to, get their courage up and ask?
Sure.
Thank you. Because what you're tackling here is Monmouth. I think that's very apparent. It's a big deal, and it's going to take a lot of time and detail, and bless all of you for doing it. But maybe could you go into a little bit more detail? I mean, because you're giving us the vision and the hard work that's going to be involved in this kind of an alignment that hasn't been done before. Mm-hmm. But for our kiddos, you started to touch on it just a few seconds ago. For kids who are diverse learners, whatever that might mean for any given family, during the course of all this work and development, all the other initiatives that aren't bolded are still going to be addressed, like professional development will be ongoing. Mm-hmm. So where in this mix do you feel if you might be addressing as part of this plan, what might be done, or backup curriculum for kids who might not access the same exact material in the same exact way, but to your point, will still be in the same grade, meeting the same standards? Where is that going to fit in as you develop this map?
So it fits in everywhere. So that's why it's so important that we have our special education representatives as part of this team. So, Paula is part of the conversation. Meredith is part of the conversation. We have two special education teachers part of the conversation. And I think from what I've heard is in the past, some special education teachers have felt like they didn't have the right materials. And so they had to borrow from a classroom teacher to make adaptions or to make changes. And when we adopted the new math program, I counted all special education teachers in that mix. So all special education teachers have the curriculum that every mainstream teacher in the district has. And so I think they felt, validated and supported by that, so that they had all the resources at their fingertips as well. But it's also through the professional development and the MTSS work that we're doing. It's a skill set to scaffold instruction and to not fall into the trap of using curriculum from the year prior to teach kids because they can't access third grade curriculum. Teachers need to be supported in that work, and they need to have the time to professionally collaborate. And that's why the schedule this year, when we developed it, we prioritized every grade level of teachers being off at the same time so that they can support each other and talk with each other and plan with each other. So it's embedded. It's really, it's about all students, and we can't have these conversations when we're looking at students in subgroups. We have to have the conversation, all means all, and we're going to get everybody there. What does our scope and sequence need to look like so that we have every student successful? What does our curriculum map need to have embedded in it so that all students, regardless of their ability to access instruction, has the supports and systems they need to get there?
Can I just ask you one follow-up, and then I'll be quiet for anybody else who might want to ask you a question?
Sure.
As part of all this, and giving teachers the support that they need and the resources that they need, which would be phenomenal, will there be opportunities for the kids themselves, those who learn differently, to demonstrate their knowledge in different ways? And I don't know what that means right now. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but some kids, as we all know, are more visual learners. Some kids draw better than others. In other words, will there be an opportunity for them to demonstrate their knowledge through their strengths, as well as all the interventions?
Absolutely. And I think that will, as this work evolves and we get to eventually to the part of the honing in on assessments, so scope and sequence, curriculum mapping will all lead to how do we assess our students. And that's when progress-based, project-based assessments and opportunities to show what you know in different ways, that will be the conversation we have that year. And that will be the professional development we have that year. And that's another priority that we put in our elementary schedule by providing that win block. So students had an opportunity to have multiple approaches to showing what they know and to learn in the way that there are multiple opportunities to learn in different ways throughout their one academic day.
Thank you so much, Nan.
So there are a couple questions in the chat. The first one is, how is DEI different from CRT? And maybe you want to say what those acronyms are just to make sure everyone knows.
Sure. It's a fairly common misconception that diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI work is aligned with CRT, which is critical race theory. I can state unequivocally that we do not teach critical race theory in the Marblehead Public Schools. There's not a movement afoot to teach critical race theory. The work in diversity, equity, and inclusion is exactly what Nan said, that all means all. So when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, you look at things like, are females represented in advanced placement or advanced math and science courses on a level with male counterparts? Do we have represented diverse students in our advanced placement courses, or are there processes like teacher recommendation or qualifying score that prevent them from accessing those? How are our special education students represented in advanced coursework? Does a decision for your 7th grade math class preclude you from being able to get to advanced placement stats? Are there district policy considerations for how students have access to our curriculum, to our supports? We have a 22% special education identification rate in the district, which is significantly above the state average. I'm glad to see Dr. Donnelly come on the screen there in case I'm giving erroneous information. But why is that? That's DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in that we want to make sure, and again, quoting Nan, all means all.
Thank you. There's another question. Are there any special education teachers as an integral part of the process, for example, in the planning and the work?
Yes. So the planning, we have on the planning team, Joan Miller, who is a special education teacher. And as this work now goes school-based, so leaders will now take this work with lead teachers, and part of that team will include a special education representative at every school.
Great, thank you. And then there's another question. In mapping the scope and sequence of Marblehead's curriculum and making sure it's aligned, what resources are you using to decide what should be taught and at what grade?
That's a great question. The Massachusetts state frameworks outlines all of that for us. We really don't have a choice. We are guided by the frameworks. And pretty much all of our curriculum that we've evaluated and looked at when we were going through the math adoption, new curriculum adoption, it's all aligned for us already. Because the manufacturers realize they won't be able to sell it if it's not aligned to the Common Core and to the state standards.
Great. And then to go back to, there are some sort of follow-up questions to some of the earlier questions. So is there a plan by the district to do CRT?
No.
Okay. And then in follow-up to the question on, are the special education's part of the process, who picks those teachers that are involved?
I think the way we've done everything so far is soliciting volunteers. So I think if there were going to be more than one volunteer, then maybe the volunteers could work it out among themselves, or the school-based principal would have that conversation with them.
Okay, great.
And there may be opportunities for more than one to serve. If I were a principal, I would welcome more people, but it is going to end up taking time for folks. So, but if people are willing to commit the time, I don't think we'll turn many people away.
The next question is, who is designing the curriculum map? Is this being designed by the teachers and agreed upon by all the teachers, or is this done by administration?
The whole process will be including teachers. The teachers will be part of the development of the curriculum map. Curriculum mapping is not new. It's an education process that has been driving the work for 30 years. So there are pretty standardized approaches to what a curriculum map looks like. Where the teachers are critical is filling in where the materials are in surplus and where we are lacking, and what additional things need to be included to be able to provide that robust academic experience.
Great. Here's another question. If there is no choice about what resources to use to align the curriculum, and it must be the MAS frameworks, why was this not used in the past? Is the MAS frameworks new?
No.
I'll jump in there. No, the MAS frameworks are not new. They undergo regular revisions. For example, the social studies and social sciences, history frameworks have recently changed. I think there is a working group looking at the fine arts state standards. I know as a former Spanish teacher, there were world language standards in development for what seemed like forever before those were published. Math frameworks change, ELA frameworks change. So they're not new. They were part of ed reform, which was part of aligning to MCAS testing, making sure that all districts were providing students grade level expectations that were equitable, so that if you're in Newton or Wellesley or Wayland or Marblehead, you weren't getting one option at the 7th grade in terms of ELA or math that would be different if you were in Chicopee or Holyoke or Boston or a different district. And so that's where MCAS came in to say, okay, we have these frameworks, we have given you the information of what the grade level standard and expectations are. Now we're going to add an accountability measure to make sure that you're providing those and teaching those. And Nan, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, that's great. Yep. And so why it wasn't here when we arrived. I know there's been work in schools. I just don't think there was ever a cohesive approach to bringing all that work together. So that's what we're attempting to do through this.
Any other questions, Jen, that you have?
No, that's it. If anyone else has any. Could also raise your hand if you want to ask live.
Nan, can I sneak in one more then? And then we'll move on.
I think you have a parent hand up.
I have one question.
Okay, let somebody else go. Yes, go ahead.
So I don't really know how to phrase, I don't really know how to phrase this question. My son is a METCO student. I still feel really new to the METCO program because of the pandemic. This is our first year of like a quote unquote normal. We're still in a pandemic, so it's still not normal. But the first year, and my roundabout question, I guess, is there going to be some sensitivity? Because I hear people questioning, critical race theory and stuff like that, and without going like completely political, is there going to be some sensitivity in how certain aspects of history is taught? And I'm just to give you where my question's coming from. First year that we were there was an assignment in 3rd grade where the students were asked to do an assignment about how their family had immigrated to America. As African-American people, our family didn't immigrate. And the teacher said to me, well, can't he just pick a country in Africa? And it was really kind of dismissive when I said to her, well, no, I don't know where we're from in Africa. We did not immigrate to Africa. She says, well, it wasn't meant to be political. I'm not trying to be political. That's our history. So I'm just curious in the work that is being done, which I appreciate, is there some thought to those kind of small instances of, can I say like the experiences of some of the family, clearly not all of the families, especially the Brown families, and that didn't immigrate from a different country. And I'm just giving you an example, but it's just kind of in my mind, like, is there a kind of a net to kind of think about this, that small kind of, does that make sense? I'm sorry.
It absolutely makes sense. And I'll jump right in there because that is a great example of why districts are engaging in this work. That even at the state level, I believe it was 2 years ago, there was a question on the 10th grade MCAS test that asked students to put themselves in the position of a slave or a slave owner. And it was just so tone deaf. And the state really recognized that. But that's why these conversations are important, because I don't think anyone goes into this work, anyone becomes an educator to knowingly be dismissive or hurtful or inconsiderate with a student. And we make assumptions and we have our own values that we bring to this work, but having collective conversations around that and your willingness to raise that is why DEI work is so important in districts. And Nan, you're part of our DEI team, so maybe you could talk a little bit about the conversations that have happened there and some work that's planned for the future.
So I just appreciate your comment on so many different levels. I want to address the curriculum level, where that is an example of having independent practitioners talking about a concept in very different ways across a grade level, and not having a shared social studies curriculum that drives those conversations or is, helps teachers navigate how to handle the variety of different students sitting in front of them, is where we're going to be at some point, looking at curriculum and what are teachers using to facilitate those lessons and conversations, and are there materials that we can support them with. So I so appreciate you talking with that. Professional development is where these conversations need to happen to broaden awareness, and those have begun in the district. So we have prioritized Wednesdays. I think there are 3 more Wednesdays remaining on the school calendar after school meetings, where the DEI team is going to be talking with teachers about different ways of having conversations with students and unpacking some of the language in our mission statement that we've developed as a district with students. So those conversations are coming, and I think, we're in a really good place because we have a plan for those conversations. So it's not that we're reacting to things that are happening that are forcing us into conversations. We actually have a very purposefully planned, scaffolded way of talking with teachers, who will ultimately end up talking with parents and kids about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Paula,
Nan, if I can jump in on just one more point, part of what we need to do involves looking at the curriculum and examining the curriculum for that kind of bias, and for those, that's beyond a microaggression to be blunt. So part of what we need to do is look at not just how we're teaching, but what we're teaching. So there's a number of different layers to this. So part of it is the curriculum itself, as well as working with staff and doing professional development on how to have those conversations and how to do it in a productive, authentic, and meaningful kind of way.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, because I love the idea of there being a safe space for people to ask questions that to others might seem as ignorant, but could just be truly based off of like exposure and just not knowing, and people just need to ask. So I actually really appreciate that.
There are no more questions in the chat.
Could I just say one thing, Jacqueline? I just want to echo everybody else's comments. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm a big believer as an educator, and I know that the district is too, so I'm not talking out of turn here, in cultural relevance. And one of the leaders of cultural relevance, as I'm sure you know, and other people know, is Gloria Ladson Billings. And so this is what I think is meant by DEI too, to the search for common ground. I'm not making light of it, and I'm not trying to impose my ideas on the district. But when you were talking, I was listening to you very closely, and I'm thinking, I have no idea where my family really came from. We think we kind of know, but nobody knows for sure. And there's an opportunity there to be sensitive and to share our own experiences that might not be the same, but are related somehow. And that's what I think we're all trying to do, is to find a way to show kids that this is what we mean when we say inclusion. It's really acceptance and belonging to a community. And that's what we're working towards here, I think. But thank you so much. Come to more of our meetings.
You'll become very familiar with me, I promise.
That's wonderful. We look forward to it.
Mhm.
Okay, so back to John and Nan. I mean, it's your show.
If there aren't any more questions,
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it was wonderful. Would anybody like to make any comments if you have no more
Oh,
questions? Oh,
uh,
go
Maggie-
ahead, Jen. Go ahead.
Maggie Dobbin has her hand up.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I'm a teacher at the Glover School, and I was a member of the Planning for Success team, and I'm also a member of the DEI team. And I just wanted to echo from a teacher's perspective what Nan said earlier, which is that teachers are working very actively on building curriculum to be more inclusive and diverse. And like many people who are participating in this meeting, one of the things that teachers are doing through professional development this year is working to move themselves along the ladder of understanding. And in doing that, there's going to be, along with the scope and sequence that Nan was referencing, a lot of redevelopment of our curriculum to look at the perspective from which it's told. And that takes a tremendous amount of work. And we also welcome voices like yours, Jacqueline, where we point out areas of inequity and bring it to the table for discussion so that we find those small places that need to be reevaluated and reconstructed so that we tell the truth of the story and the truths of the histories. And that's going to take a tremendous amount of work, but it's also going to take the community to help us do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? So just to repeat, and I saw Meredith put something in the chat, for those of you who might have come in a little bit late, or you can check out the recording that's going to go up in a couple of days. We're going to be initiating a survey soon. And Jacqueline, I'm speaking to you and everybody else who's come tonight, and we thank you for that. Anybody who wants to get advance notice of CPAC or ask questions of us, not just of district leaders, please, if you're willing to share your email, we're happy to contact you, and you can contact us through our website. The other thing that I just wanted to add, first of all, a big thank you to John and Nan. I mean, it was really wonderful of you to come and to share and to be so open and honest in answering our questions. We really appreciate it more than we can say. And we hope you'll come back again at another time as we move forward through the year. I also want to give a big shout out to everybody who helped us gather this very big group of people, everybody who sent out emails, Paula Donnelly, and our own CPAC people who posted things on Facebook. So to all of you who really helped us get the word out so that we could have this very productive exchange tonight, thank you all so very, very much. If anybody wants to add anything else, I just want to give a plug then. Within the next, hopefully, we don't know exactly when, but within the next few weeks, probably before the end of the year, we are going to be sending out a parent survey where we're going to ask you what you would like to learn more about, what you would like to talk about, what issues are of interest to you for us to have at our meetings so that you can come, not just to sit and listen, but to do what we're doing here tonight. We might not always have John, Nan, Paula, and other district people, but we'll have each other. And we really want to make them productive and meaningful meetings for all of you. So when that survey comes through your email, please fill it out and send it back to us so that we can structure the rest of our year around what your needs and wishes and wants are. Can't thank you enough. Jen, do you want to add anything?
No, we're happy for the big turnout tonight, and thank you, John and Nan. This was great.
It was terrific.
Really
We
appreciate
were
it.
both very happy to be here, and Merle and Jennifer, you promised a warm and receptive audience, and that's just what we got. So we're happy to come back anytime, but we don't have to come to a meeting for people to feel like they have an audience with us. Door is always open. You want to schedule a time to come in and have additional conversation or want a further explanation of something you heard this evening. I won't speak for Nan, but I will. She's always willing and happy to meet with parents and community members on the work that we're doing in the district, as am I. And a big shout out to Paula Donnelly, who is doing an exceptional job in a very, difficult position. She has come in both feet on the ground running mid-August, and I just would be remiss with this group not to recognize Paula and all the great work she's doing.
Well, I'm sure we echo that. We really appreciate Paula. And John, several comments came in as you and Nan were speaking to us this evening. Can you forward the slide presentation to us for distribution as well?
Absolutely.
We would really appreciate that. And we'll also post it on our website. I know Meredith made mention of that as well. So we wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving and a nice,
Thank you.
enjoyable long weekend next week. Safe trip, Paula. So to everybody who's here tonight, thank you so much. Please feel free to contact us as well as John and Nan and Paula anytime. We're happy to hear from you. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you all for hosting.